What's up, guys? We are back again for some more One Piece action. Today we got a little bit of theorizing as well as responding to a viewer comment that we got on the last video. And when it comes to the last video, I just want to thank everybody that came out and supported it. We got a bunch of comments, ton of likes, ton of views, so even a bunch of new subscribers. So thank you to all of you that supported it. But let's go. So the comment I got, I'll throw it up on screen here, says this comes from user N. Says, my bet on which kingdom Emu hails from is Lulusia. The implied reasons why Lulusia was erased sounds to me like Oda leaving a trail of red herrings for us to come to the wrong conclusion. First, because they revolted. So did 7 other kingdoms, so that doesn't track. And second, the one with more weight, because Sabo was there. I'll admit this does sound legit, but why attack Lulusia instead of waiting for Sabo to go back to the Kamabaka Kingdom, since the world government knew that the new headquarters of the Revs was there? Okay. Then it says, the attack itself throws a big wrench at the gears of what makes the One Piece world work. Like the world government and Emu had this capability all along, but somehow they have trouble with the 4 Yonkos and other pirates. That doesn't make sense to me. Why didn't they use that attack on, say, Wano or Whole Cake Island or Hachinosu, etc.? It makes no sense to have that kind of power at the hands of the world government / Emu when the narrative is they are at war with these pirate superpowers. Okay, understandable. Then it says, I think the reason Lulusia was erased was to erase Emu's traces from the world. Okay, interesting. It says, and that this weapon was already set to go off above Lulusia just in case. So my bet is that this isn't just some weapon that the world government or Emu can spam or use anywhere else. Okay, I like that. Now that the world is about to find out about the secret hidden ruler of the world through Sabo and the revolutionaries and Big News Morgan and Wapol, because Emu's former kingdom was Lulusia. It makes sense for Emu to be wary since Emu just found out that King Cobra has knowledge of one of the 20 founding kings named Emu. So if King Cobra knows, who else might know? Therefore, it makes sense to wipe out Emu's former kingdom from the map so that no one can point to her history. Lulusia never existed. Alright, so pretty heavy comment right there, but I absolutely loved it. That's why I make these videos, is to get comments like these and, you know, spark these conversations and debates. So let's just jump right into it. So, you know, we started talking about the nations that revolted. There's the 8 Nation Revolution, but we also found out that later on, when Dragon is talking about it, it was actually 12 nations that revolted against their leaders or their government or whatever, but only 8 of them were actually successful. And we know that one of them was Lulusia. Now, of all these kingdoms, one of the first questions that comes to my mind was, how many of these 12 kingdoms that attempted to revolt were actually part of the original 20 kingdoms? So right now, you know, the original 20 kingdoms that we know for sure were Dressrosa and Alabasta. So far, those are the only 2 confirmed original 20 kingdoms. Everyone else that we see, you know, we don't know whether or not their kingdom was part of the original 20 or were just other island nations that were kind of annexed and added over time. So if Lulusia was one of the 12, or, you know, one of the 12 from the original 20, maybe there's a hidden weapon to control it. So kind of like how we say in this, you know, in this comment, he talks about how the possibility that Lulusia being Emu's home, there was already a previously, you know, stationed weapon there in case anything should happen, that he'd be able to kind of erase his existence. So, you know, you guys remember a few or not few, a bunch of chapters now, but we saw, you know, that explosion on top of Lulusia. It just looked like the complete island just was obliterated in one shot. You know, we saw that Sabo, or we thought that Sabo was there, and that's where he was attempting to make his communication to Dragon, you know, to inform him about seeing the empty throne being filled by Emu and all the events that transpired with Cobra and everything like that. But, you know, we don't know for sure what exactly is this power. What was that attack? Was it Uranus that, you know, we haven't seen yet, the last ancient weapon that we haven't seen? Was it maybe, you know, something, you know, ancient from ancient times, like 800 years ago? You know, we've seen that they have technology from back then that's very sophisticated, but you know they can't replicate its power sources or what have you. But a friend of mine, my boy Dime, he suggested maybe, you know, what if they have some type of moon weapon and they can use that to target, you know, known locations as a way of maybe, you know, bringing back in the moons and everything back into the fold. Maybe, you know, Eno, we saw in that cover story when he went up to the moon, you know, there was this whole civilization that had been kind of dying out, but it was a civilization that was based on his devil fruit kind of powering their whole little, you know, civilization. But what if there's something else similar that the, you know, original 20 Kings or Emu was able to kind of utilize in order to force a stalemate with the ancient kingdom? You know, they could target them or what have you. But then that starts to be, why did they only use this on, you know, Lulusia? Why didn't they go after Whole Cake Island? Why didn't they go after, you know, Hachinosu or anything like that? Or even Egghead, you know, they're going there to attack and kill, what's his name? Oh my god, I can't think of his name. The scientist, Vegapunk, excuse me. They're going there to kill Vegapunk, but if they know that he's been investigating the poneglyphs and looking into the Void Century and things like that, you know, why wouldn't they use an attack like this? Well, for a place like Egghead, I would say, you know, they can't use an attack like this because they're trying to preserve Punk records. You know, even though they want to get rid of Vegapunk himself, they still want to maintain all the knowledge that he's learned and utilized and everything that he's done. So they can't really destroy the island like they did with Lulusia. But then we circle back around, okay, what about, you know, known enemy spots like Whole Cake Island, you know, Big Mom's camp, Wano when it was under Kaido's rule, Hachinosu, which is underneath Blackbeard, you know, Elbaf, which we saw Shanks was hanging out, you know, all these places that are not necessarily affiliated, and some are just straight up enemies of the world government. But we didn't see this attack, you know, take all places like that, even though they're known enemies. So it makes you wonder, okay, so what was so special about Lulusia? And then going back to the comment, you know, then it does start to kind of make sense. Okay, you know, maybe that's where Emu is from. Maybe that's where, you know, his originating kingdom is from. Like I said, we don't really know a whole lot about the other 20 kingdoms. We don't know for sure which ones are, which ones aren't. We've seen from Reverie, you know, though we know for sure that those kings that were around, not every single one of them was part of the original 20. We know that Poseidon was not, you know, the Ryukyugu kingdom was not part of the original 20 kingdoms. They're just there to, you know, try to mitigate the hatred towards fishmen and, you know, move forward. You have other places that used to be associated that weren't associated this time, like the Germa kingdom, you know, Sanji's family. They used to attend Reverie, but because of everything that happened at Whole Cake Island, you know, they're not attending this year. But I highly doubt that they were part of the original 20 kingdoms. I could be wrong, but doesn't seem likely. So again, why did Lulusia warrant such special treatment versus anywhere else? Well, one thing that, you know, like I said in the comment that I brought up in my last video, you know, Sabo being there, knowing the knowledge that he has and about to drop a dime, it seems the most likely, like, hey, they were trying to take him out. They thought he was on Lulusia. And then as to why didn't they just wait till he went to the Kamabaka Kingdom? Well, then that kind of goes back to the other portion of his comment where he's talking about, you know, there's already a previously stationed weapon there in order to destroy it should Emu ever need to. And that started to get me thinking, well, you know, this is where the theory is going to come in a little bit. But so far we've seen, you know, poneglyphs scattered throughout the world where Joy Boy leaves behind these clues for his allies, you know, in order for them to fight the world government later on. You know, weapon, or, you know, things about ancient weapons, notes explaining the history, all that kind of stuff. That's what Joy Boy left for his companions and the people that followed after him and inherited his will. But, you know, it seems like you have Joy Boy and then you have Emu, who's kind of like his exact opposite, his reverse essentially, right? So for Emu, instead of leaving behind you know, clues and helpful things, I could see Emu potentially leaving behind, you know, quote unquote, you know, these bombs or these things that are exploding to take out the original 20 kingdoms. If we kind of assume that the original 20 kingdoms that formed the world government are the kingdoms that were either the strongest or had, you know, the most influence, you know, continuing throughout 800 years, you're going to want to have an ability to keep those nations in check as the overall world leader. So what better way than to implant something, either a bomb or maybe perhaps some type of, you know, targeting system or something in there that draws this direct attack. You know, if we're thinking of the moon thing, maybe there's something that they use to target that's, you know, implanted in every one of the original 20 kingdoms that allows them to blow it up. That's why we didn't see Ohara get taken out with an attack like this, because it wasn't, Ohara is not one of the original 20 kingdoms. Ohara doesn't have a king necessarily, you know what I mean? So just like I said, we've seen Joy Boy, he left behind poneglyphs at allied nations. We haven't seen any poneglyphs at nations that are directly, I would say, not directly affiliated with the world government, but, you know, are really in line with the world government. The two exceptions would be Alabasta, which we now understand why, given, you know, everything with Nefertari D. Lily and the fact that she has a D in her name, so it makes sense that she would hide a poneglyph in her country. Then the other kingdom that's now currently aligned with the world government that I mentioned before is the Ryukugu kingdom, you know, the fishmen. But again, they weren't one of the original 20 kingdoms, because we know they've had a road poneglyph there, as well as another poneglyph talking about Joy Boy and his letter to Poseidon. But again, they joined the world government not because they're really in line with how they do things. They're just trying to end the persecution of fishmen. So that's why they're aligned. Everywhere else that we've seen a poneglyph is not associated with the world government. We've seen them at Whole Cake Island. We've seen them on Zo. We've seen them at Wano. We've seen them on Jaya. Or not Jaya, excuse me. We saw them up in the Sky Island. It was originally on Jaya, and the Shandorians, you could clearly tell, were not affiliated with the world government. But then, you know, it got blasted up to Sky Island. But again, all these places, these are all the known locations that we've seen of poneglyphs, I believe. I think there was one that Robin found in her teenage years in the West Blue. So not too sure if that was a country affiliated with the world government or what have you. But so far we haven't seen, like I said, any of the major countries that are in line with them that really support the world government having a poneglyph. The one exception that was a part of the original 20 was Alabasta, but again, because of Nefertari D. Lily, it makes complete sense why that country, even though they were part of the original 20 kingdoms, would have a poneglyph. But again, conversely, Emu wants to control everyone. He doesn't want to help anyone. He wants to be the one in control of everything. So if he left behind some way, you know, to guarantee his control over these original 20 kingdoms, the kingdoms that are going to have the most impact and the most influence, then it would make sense, you know, if Lulusia is one of the original 20 kingdoms, then it would have something like this. As far as is Emu from Lulusia, you guys know, if you saw my last video, I kind of theorized that maybe he could be related to the Doflamingos, since that's the celestial dragon family we've kind of seen the most from, gotten the most information out of. I did forget to mention one family, the Fingerling family. Thank you to the person in the comments that reminded me of that. Appreciate it. But anyways, you know, if Emu is from Lulusia, as it stands right now, their nobles don't seem like they care anything about looking into the Void Century like we saw with Cobra. You know, because we saw the king, I believe we saw the king and the princess from Lulusia. She was the one that got kidnapped on the way to Reverie, and Kobe ended up saving them. But yeah, they didn't seem hardly, you know, nothing screamed at me like, oh, these people are going to be investigating the Void Century. And when it comes to Cobra having this knowledge, you know, because they mention at the end of the comment, and mentions like, oh, because Cobra had this knowledge and he knew about one of the original 20 kings being named Imu, you know, Imu wants to erase and not take any chances and, you know, erase any traces of himself. But I would say he probably already did that. You know, if he really was from Lulusia, he would have wiped everything out possible. The only reason that Cobra had information is because Lily specifically left him a letter behind, you know, telling him these things. And again, she was a D, so we can see why she was leaving behind these clues, why she was hiding a poneglyph. You know, we know she's the reason why the D persisted. But again, it makes sense that Cobra has this knowledge because he had an ancestor that was, you know, seemingly actively against Imu, even though she was officially aligned with him. All of her actions and things seem to kind of say like, no, she was perhaps a double agent for the ancient kingdom. But Lulusia being targeted to hide Imu's traces, while definite possibility, I think it's really interesting. I would think if you had the capability to target, you know, specifically one of the original 20 kingdoms, you would target Alabasta more than you would target Lulusia. Even if potentially he is from Lulusia, I feel like Alabasta would be the more sensitive informationally because, yeah, you may have killed King Cobra right there, but you still don't have Vivi under control. You don't know where the letter is, and you don't know, honestly, how many people Cobra told about this letter and what the contents of this letter was. So it would be smarter to take all of Alabasta out and, you know, guarantee that nobody else has this information versus taking out the country where no one seems to be looking into it, stuff like that. Again, it totally makes sense when you think of it from the frame of, okay, Imu's trying to hide his existence. You know, he kind of got called out on a little bit by Cobra, so he's just doubling up and cleaning house. But again, the more logical play to me, it seems like, would be to take out Alabasta with something like whatever this attack was that was at Lulusia. And then again, even this attack at Lulusia, what exactly is it? Was it Uranus? Was it an attack from the moon? Another possibility, if you guys have seen Film Z, they have those things called the Dynastones. You know, they were like extremely reactive. If they're exposed to air and extremely explosive, they try to blow up the endpoints. Well, what if they had something, I know, you know, that's not necessarily canon, but what if they had something similar, just exposed or, you know, like I said, implanted in all of the original 20 kingdoms. That way, should they ever get out of line, Imu has the ability to just take them out like that. But it could also be Uranus, since we haven't seen it, and it would be kind of interesting to see, you know, Luffy and the gang kind of have a leg up on where Pluton is, plus they have Frankie. They're, you know, allied with Poseidon already, but then to have Imu have the third weapon to kind of, you know, make it a little more interesting, balance it out a little bit. But yeah, these are all just kind of things that make me wonder, like, if Imu really is from Lulusia, why would he wait till now to erase everything like that? You know what I mean? He had 800 years, potentially 800 years if he is the original Imu. He had 800 years to, you know, scrub himself from history. I can't imagine that he would have left anything, especially on his home island, especially after he probably, you know, took power however he did with the 20 kings and kind of phased himself out to become this mysterious leader. I just can't imagine him leaving something that would be incriminating. As far as the letter from Lily to Cobra, or not directly to Cobra, but to her ancestors, or not to her ancestors, but to her descendants, I should say, you know, Imu had no knowledge that she passed this letter on to him. And the second that he heard about it, you know, he kills Cobra, and then, like we all kind of suspect, Sabo saw it, so they intercept the transmission. They think they know where Sabo is, and they have to take him out before he gets to the Kamabaka Kingdom, because the Kamabaka Kingdom is not affiliated with the world government. So if they have these weapons in place that, you know, seem to be limited to affiliated countries, then they would definitely need to take Sabo out while he's still at Lulusia before he leaves and goes beyond their grasp. And again, it makes sense why they weren't able to use stuff like this against, you know, Whole Cake Island, Big Mom, against Wano, against Hachinosu. It's because they're only able to target affiliated countries. So they really were trying to take Sabo out before he could drop a dime and reveal Imu, you know, to the rest of the Revolutionary Army, especially to Dragon and all them. But why didn't we use it in Alabasta? I don't know. You would think it would make more sense, but the only other place I think that people might consider as a possibility we've seen this weapon or heard of this weapon being used before would be God Valley. You know, it was there one day and then it was gone the next. And we know that God Valley, when the incident occurred, there were celestial dragons there. So clearly it probably had to be an affiliated country if there's a bunch of celestial dragons there. So again, this power that's able to erase islands, not a buster call that can destroy islands, but literally just erase them from existence. It's only happened to affiliated countries with the world government, people under Imu's direct control. And again, I just wonder, is this intentional? Did Imu leave something behind in order to control his quote-unquote allies, in direct contradiction to Joy Boy, who left the poneglyphs in order to guide, encourage, and help his future allies? You know what I mean? So again, this was an awesome comment by Ann, and it spurred a lot of thoughts in my head. I got a lot of different theories, you know, still stemming from this, where we could go. What was that attack? You know, is Imu from there, or is he a Don Quixote? Let me know what you guys think. Do you think he could be from Lulusia? Do you guys think he is a Don Quixote? Do you think maybe he's a Fingerling? Tell me down in the comments section. If you made it to this point, thank you. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Have a wonderful day.